What if you could take that risk, make that change, reach that goal, live your best life? Welcome to another episode of the What If You Could podcast, where we get together with amazing experts and everyday people who share challenges, encourage healing, and explore the possibilities that life has to offer. I'm your host, Gary Scott, and I'm excited that you're along for the ride. Hey, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the What If You Could podcast. And today, my glowing guest here is Roxanne Chaput. Hello, Roxanne. How are you?
Hi, Carrie. How are you? I'm
Oh,
good.
I'm good. Good. We're going to have some fun, huh?
I feel it. Let's go.
Yeah. And we're going to change some lives. We're going to do all sorts of just great stuff. I love
Yeah.
it. I love it. So
All
I'm
right.
gonna, if I may, I'm just gonna read a real quick blurb, so everyone knows a little bit about Roxanne, and then we're gonna fire away.
Amazing. Sounds amazing.
Cool biz. All right, guys. Um, Globally renowned luminary, leader, speaker, and creatrix, Roxanne Chaput is known as the acclaimed Sacred One, a powerful visionary celebrated for creating sacred spaces, weaving and anchoring ancient intergenerational legacies through unifying and forging multifaceted healing elements with one's multidimensional conscious leadership. Roxanne cultivates revolutionizing embodied cultural pathways for effective healing and transformational change throughout all of humanity. And that's just the beginning of this young lady. So, so welcome again, my friend. Because we are the What If You Could podcast, I just have one quickie question, and then I'll get out of the way. But do you have a what if you could moment you had in your life, or do you have a what if you could for the gang that you could share with us?
Yes, I do. My what if you could moment would really be I've always had this vision since I was a little girl that I would be kind of serving the underserved children and really kind of helping them explore their gifts and really, harnessing stability and emotional, love and capacity and all these things that would really help them be fruitful and help them, be really successful in life. So if I could, I would help every single child that, has underserved privileges kind of accomplish that and for them to understand their magic.
Wow, that's awesome. I mean, that's freaking beautiful. I mean, you know, when you, if people step back and kind of get the hate mechanism that's working there and just really focus down, I mean, there's a lot of hurting children out there right now, don't you think?
Yeah, I think that, when we look around us, just seeing where the world is shifted and just seeing a lot of the wounding that comes, from societal uplifting and just, environmental circumstances and family environments. I don't feel that at times or, something can happen in the family dynamic that alters the pathway for that child. So there's a lot of elements that really could be enhanced so that there could be, this beautiful piece where they feel part of a community and they feel like they are being supported and they feel like they have access to the same resources and the same opportunities as every other child.
What's missing, do you think, or maybe not what's missing, but what do you think's been lost the way we serve our children?
I think we've forgotten the sense of community. I think we've forgotten the sense of self and just even the emotional connectivity to oneself. I think that a lot of things have, transpired that really create disconnection and disease and dissonance between, communities and between just society. When we look at our own community from even 20 years ago, each neighbor would talk to each other and the kids were playing in the streets, and we don't see that happen anymore. We don't see that nurturing aspect of community and gathering and I will be here for you. I can help support this. It takes a community to raise a child. It's not just a family dynamic that raises a child. So there's a lot of missing pieces I feel that we've lost along the way. And I think it's just a point of remembrance, of bringing that back into context and remembering the power of community and understanding what is creating that divisiveness, what is creating that segregation, and how do we come back into community and come back into one.
Yeah, I mean, you pretty much nailed that, kiddo. I mean, there's so many pieces to it. I mean, it's kind of hard to just pick one. I mean, you look at social media, you look at diet, you look at, like you said, we don't talk to our neighbors, so there's kind of an isolationism. The only way kids kind of interact now is through social media, which is just the death knell to any child. I mean, some of the research they've done on it is just so horrifying. Um, but diet too, it's like our souls are just so malnourished. Not just our bodies are malnourished, but our souls are so malnourished, don't you think?
Yeah, and like our soul has desires, right? And our soul doesn't yearn for what it does not know to exist. So when we know that, our soul is yearning community, it's important that we feel that we belong. If we're looking and we're seeking identity, the soul desires identity. It really wants security, it wants stability, it wants identity, it wants love, it wants all of these pieces that are more of the soul's desires that are not being nourished and they're not being nurtured because of all of these things that are kind of detracting and, you know, methodologies and even, social media and things like that that are really creating a little bit more of that separation to the soul essence, the soul desires. It's instant wins, instant gratification, instant validation, instead of going inwardly and asking, where am I being called? Where am I being drawn? What are my desires? What am I yearning for in my life? What do I need to feel fulfilled, not just in a moment, but through a lifetime, right? Through fulfillment through a lifetime. And I think there's just that missing piece. And when we're always distracted and we're always, you know, paying attention to everything else, it's very challenging to come back into the soul essence when the mental body is really taking precedent and really being the driver of the car at that point.
Yeah, I think kind of chipping on what you said, it's like I don't really like the term role model, um, or maybe leader. Maybe we've just, I mean, I don't know if kids have any sort of foundation. First of all, I think there's a super lack of foundation, but I don't think they have like a North Star. You know what I mean? I don't think, like you said, they're aspiring to something that your soul is led by something. Your soul has that desire, and then we kind of tamp it down. We kind of crush it a little bit by the social media and the diet and the lack of community and stuff you mentioned about. I mean, what do you think about that? I mean, is it a lack of role models? Is it a lack of just general curiosity? I mean, what happened to the spirit? What happened to the soul on the kids, you think?
Yeah, I feel like there's a desensitization that begins to happen at very early stages when we think about, you know, the emotional body that we express being a child, the curiosity, the imagination, the excitement, the joie de vivre that we have when we are children, to how it, simultaneously changes and how as it progressively changes throughout our lifespan. We see we see connection points, right? We see data points of where we start losing the emotional body, the emotional expression, because it's too much, it's too loud. You don't do that. It's not accepted in public. It's not expected, in society. You can't do this. You can't do that. Shush your voice. Don't do this. Don't do that. We don't have time for this. There's a lot of these connotations that happen within a household or even within a school environment or within any structure of an environment where they're always feeling like they're living through somebody and they're not actually living through themselves. So when we come back to that state of remembrance, when we come back to our own state of remembrance, when's the last time that we felt curiosity? When's the last time that we felt true joy? When's the last time that we belly laughed until we peed? Like all of those things are so important because they're a true expression of our emotional body. That means that we are in connectivity with the soul essence as well, right? So when children are constantly being desensitized or watching things that are desensitizing them, when we watch movies, we watch TV shows, it's not to say that these things are bad, but they do create a desensitization. I mean, it's proven. So when we have all these things that are constantly and continuously desensitizing us, it's very hard and challenging for us to be sensitized to our own emotional body. and to our own soul essence and to our own physical body and to our own mental body. And that's why we see a lot of mental disease. We see a lot of mental illness. We see a lot of these things transpire because there's a disconnection to the emotional body. There's a disconnection to the mental body. There's a disconnection to the spiritual, energetic body. And all of these things start taking place. So when we understand, that if my child is going to sit here for 6 hours and watch, violent things that are going to desensitize them, but then, a child at school gets hurt or they get hurt, there's a desensitization that happens to them, right? Because they've already been sensitized to something. We think about, an occupation that deals with a lot of trauma or a lot of things that, like first responders and things of that nature, there becomes a desensitization, right? But it's not truly a desensitization. It's more of a different stress response, right? We just don't react in the same way that we would emotionally react to it. But at the end of the day, it's a compression of emotion. We're pressurizing an emotion without experiencing the emotion itself.
Just for the record, at my age, I laugh really hard until I pee all the time. So I
I'm
just want
guilty.
to just want to get that out there. But you're right. I mean, just like normal joy, like just sharing right now, just being silly, just normal joy has kind of been lost. I think the innocence for sure has been lost on the children. I'm just while you're going up, you're just blowing my mind up. So I'm just writing notes like crazy. But yeah, the desensitization is so huge. And what's so bizarre about the lack of curiosity in kids? I mean, think about it. I'm way older than you times five. So, but when I was a kid, when we were curious about something, we went to the library and we looked it up
Yeah.
or we made it up, right? I mean, we built the forts and we had the rocket ships and we made it up, right? We had imagination. And now kids are holding in their hand more knowledge than in the entire history of the world, yet they're still incurious, right? It's like, what happened to that? I mean, why do you think? And I don't know how we just got the kid gone down this kid rabbit hole, but it's fascinating, and I love where you're going with it. But why do you think we've lost this curiosity?
I think the loss of curiosity is when we have all the responses and we have all the answers at every given moment. There is no need for curiosity. And I also grew up in an era where there was no internet and we had to play outside and we would build our forts and we would, wild things out of our imagination and we would create things out of our imagination and we'd have, curiosity like, what is this plan? What does this do? If this happens to the earth, all these questions that would happen if we were, concerned about the environment and things of that nature. And when you think about the aspects, when you have literally a computer that has every single answer for you, you know that the answer is going to be provided for, so you don't have to nurture it in any other way, right? So it's like Googleicious. You're going on to Google and you're finding the right answer, and you have an answer to life's question within 30 seconds. So there is no need for curiosity. And because there's so much information being thrown at them on like in continual states of social media, television, all these things, their repertoire of curiosity is so filled that there's an overstimulation.
Yeah,
There's an oversaturation.
yeah, yeah. I think this. It's kind of backfired, right? I mean, when you have so much knowledge, like you said, it's like you're not even interested in being curious because, like, well, I'll just Google it or I'll just cry out for one of the talking machines that we have in our house that said, "Hey, man, answer this question for me." And it's so easy, you don't even retain things or have curiosity about things because it's just such an instant response to this instant gratification thing. And I don't think kids get to be kids like you were talking about earlier. It's like, don't do this, shut up, don't do that, blah, 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 blah. Mom's stressed, dad's stressed, everyone's stressed, the world's stressed. We just
Everyone's
run on
overly,
stress.
yeah, everyone's overly stimulated, right? There's so much overstimulation that one more noise or one more thing or one more this or one more that or one more ass or one more this, we're bogged down. We're bogged down with overstimulation already. We can't even think clearly, right? There's no space to think clearly. We're not having that quietness. We're not having that retrospectiveness. We're not having that self introspection because there is no quiet. It's noise. It's constant noise. And that's to keep us away from the connection to all of these multidimensional aspects of who we are. We're not just one part of ourselves, it's all of us, right? Like our energy fields are being enmeshed with all of these things that are happening at every given moment. Our mental body is like calculating thousands of different responses and 1,000 different inquiries that we have within our own mind. There's a constant evolution where we're not able to actually just be in the silence and be in the quiet and be comfortable in that quiet. But then at the other end, we can't have an overstimulation, or then we're just overstimulated that it's almost frenetic energy.
I love that because there's so much wonder, there's so much beauty in quiet. There's
Yeah.
something about just quiet and peace. And I think the lack of it goes to what you talked about earlier also was dis-ease. You know, it's not just disease, like we get a disease, it's dis-ease. I mean, our souls and our body are just we're uneasy. There's no ease to us anymore. It's just the constant going, the constant stimulation. I mean, our adrenals are totally getting fried, our bodies are getting fried, and you're seeing young people that are coming down with crap that you didn't see until they were like 60 years old. It's like,
Yeah.
what's happening with that? And it's not just the food, but it's also, like you said, it's the disease, it's the stress, it's that constant stimulation just wearing us out.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're constantly surrounded by, waves of Wi-Fi, signal, 5G, all these things. And it's not like, again, like none of this is bad things, like there's nothing good or bad in it. But at the end of the day, it's still interrupting the frequency of our energy. We're electromagnetic beings. And that's proven in science. It's in every spiritual practice we can imagine. So when we understand that we are electromagnetic beings and we have all of these things that are creating divisiveness within our own energetic fields, that's really powerful, right? It's really, perturbing, and it's really disruptive to our own energy fields. So it's important to be mindful of that. It's important to come back into like that space of quietness and not having all these gadgets around us all the time, that we can just be. And it's not to say that it's always possible, but even being in the own quietness and the own stillness and the own peacefulness of our own presence is very, very powerful, because our energy is very powerful.
I was just reading a book by James Nestor called Deep, and it's about the divers who go like 500. This guy trying to go to 800 feet free diving, right? It's just insane. And so he gets in the part of the book about the communication through animals, in the ocean, how the sperm whales communicate, 5 miles, which is their energy and their click,
Yeah.
and what's happening with like the solar stuff, the wind farms that they're putting in the ocean. So it's just like it's just destroying these poor creatures' ability to communicate and live, right? But people are the same way. I mean, we're surrounded by so much negative energy that
Yeah.
it throws off our core, our soul energy that, we've had forever, right?
Yeah, and there's a lot of, trying to maneuver the weather systems and maneuver all these aspects, but there are reasons and there are methodologies behind that. And I'm sure we can come to our own conclusions of what that would be. But there's a reason why they're, creating transference within biolocation. When we think about, the animal kingdom, and we think about, the mammals and all these things, biolocation is massive for them, right? But when they have frequencies and energetic dispositions that are veering them in the wrong direction, and then we're having, dead carcasses of mammals and animals come to the fruition that we've never had before, there's investigation around that. There's curiosity around that. For us to just put our hand in the sand, I think it would be a little bit naive. But when we think about humans, we also need that. There's a lot of things that are creating interference within our biolocation systems, our energetic systems, even just the way that we communicate in our communicational pathways. So I think it's important to have knowledge, not to be in the fear of that, not to be in the divisiveness of that, but to be very understanding of that, that when we feel out of sort, when we feel like we're being overstimulated or we're not able to express an emotional aspect of who we are, how do we come back to that? How do we come back to that center of self where we are the most powerful, right? We're limitless. Everything is limitless, right? There is no limit. There is no sky is the limit. There is no glass ceiling. We are absolutely limitless. And that is the power of the mind. So when we understand the power of who we are and who we innately are, it's about bringing it back and not allowing somebody else to control our own sensory bodies and the way that we conduct ourselves on a day-to-day basis.
You know, all right, I'm running out of paper on my fourth piece of paper. Um, I'm just gonna just keep going down this rabbit hole. How much time do we have?
Yeah.
Um, the controlling emotions, letting people, like you just finished with, which is not where I started, but now I'm going there. Starting, letting people control emotions. I mean, right now it seems like the number one emotion they want to shove down our throat is hate. And it seems like there's this massive push of hate, right? By political sides, by media, by religions, by just everything, right? So this hate is so harmful. It's such a harmful, it's like, I had cancer, so they had to fill me full of radiation and chemotherapy. And I knew the chemo drugs were bad, but I was hoping they were gonna at least fix something, right? They usually don't, but I was hoping that they would. But with hate, it's just poison that has no reason, right? How do we protect ourselves from this hate that's going on?
Well, when we think about, the epicenter of what hate truly is fear, right? In order to hate something, we have to fear something. And in order to fear something, we have to create a deep sadness within a community in order to create segregation and divisiveness, right? So when we think about what hate truly is, it's an illusionary process, right? Hate isn't actually how we feel towards one another. Our core emotionality towards one another is actually love, but there's so many things that compact onto that we have to, create belief systems that are structured to create divisiveness. We have, political parties that want to create divisiveness. It's all about creating fear trajectories, because what happens when we're fearful and what happens when we have hate in us, we are not exuding love. And when we're exuding love and where we're in the embodiment of love, we are the most powerful beings that we can ever be when we're in the power of love. When you feel the power of love within yourself, when you truly love somebody, you love your children, you love your spouse, you love your neighbor, you love whoever that is, that power is so significant, where hate is a very significant emotional response too, because it's the actual polarity of what love is, right? When we're thinking about love and hate, and what hate, the sensory that happens within the body, it already feels, the alchemy doesn't feel good. Nobody wants to hold on to hate forever. It's because they don't know how to release the hate. And that's the issue, right? We don't know how to release the hate because we're inundated with hate. We're injected with all these microplasms and all these things that are parasitic energies. And it's allowing us to feel like we hate things and we hate things and we hate that view. We hate this, we hate that. Right? That's the language that we use. And you hear it in everyday media. I hate this, I hate that. Hate is a very powerful word, right? Hate is a very powerful word. And when we say that we hate something and our soul is a reflection of what we are contextualizing into our language, it feels the reminiscences of that, right? It's the energetic exchange that happens with that. So when we're living in hate and we're living in dissonance and we're living in, that state of really dystopia, right? It's a dystopian feeling, because when we're living in that state of hate, we're not in a place where we can actually embody true love. We can't be in love and hate in the same emotional body. We just cannot. So what happens that we want to create more segregation? We're going to create more hate. We're going to create this movement. We're going to create that movement. We're going to do this. We're going to do that. And it's all these things to create more divisiveness, because if you have people that are divided, then you don't have the unity of one. You don't have people coming together as a collective and as a community saying, this isn't okay. This isn't okay anymore, right? We don't want to hate our neighbor. We don't want to fear Bob and Barbara down the road. And we don't want to fear that our kids go outside on the road. We don't want to fear this. We don't want to fear that. It's all about fear trajectories and fear, projections, that everything is depicted around negativity and hate. And that's the biggest emotional weight, right? When we have non-forgiveness, when we have hate sitting in our heart, that is the most profound emotion that creates dis-ease and dysfunction within the body. And working with 20,000 people, every time that they release non-forgiveness, every time they let that piece of resentment or whatever that might be, the residual of that feeling of that anger, that frustration, that hate, that dislike, whatever that feeling is, it creates disease within the body. It stores itself in the cellular component of the body. So when we're holding on to hate, we're allowing those narratives and we're allowing those directives to directly poison us, to directly intoxicate us with disease.
You know, God, you hit on so much good stuff right there. The hate, the fear, the love triangle, incestuous triangle of that. But control. If you can get people to hate each other, you can control them. You can make them do stupid shit because out of hate, right? And
Control
sometimes
them
they don't even know why they're doing it. It's
why
like,
they're angry.
right? And what did I do? I
Yeah.
mean, I get blown up by some stupid shit. I mean, I've been reading a lot about Taoism and Buddhism, right? And like,
Yeah.
so I'll forward something that I saw about Buddhism that I just think is so beautiful and spiritual. Wham! Someone will just go, "Oh, how dare you?" And I'm
Yeah.
just like, dude, it's crazy.
Love.
But you know what I found about hate is, and when I was raising my boys, that the word hate was not allowed in the house. We just didn't use word hate. It's like, oh, I hate that. It's like, no, no, no. What is it about it? Are you mad at it? Do you not like it? Is it mean to you? What is that thing doing that's making you say you hate it? Let's walk through it and not let's not use hate as a word because hate's such an ugly thing. There's
I
something
dislike,
behind the hate, right?
right? I dislike something or I am not comfortable with something is better language, right? But as soon as we see hate is just such a powerful word, right? Like you can't say anything worse to somebody than I hate you. Like
Yeah,
there is nothing, right?
there's not. But the one thing I found about hate that I love, I get off on when somebody hates something or hates me or they're super pissed off at me. If you just pour on the honey and the
Yeah,
love, the acceptance, right? You're such an asshole. I fucking hate you. I know. I'm just
I
an
know.
asshole. And this eventually you just see the hate seeping out of them because you can't hold on to that much hate and anger that long. You
Yeah,
know, they'll re-energize, right? They'll read something or watch something and they'll re-energize the hate, but you
yeah.
can't carry that hate because it'll destroy you. And like you said, if you just pour love on top of that hate, it's like, oh shit, all right.
And hate is only created to create control, right? When we think about the word hate, it's only to create control and it's for others to control narratives and to create segregation, right? Again, it's bringing back that communal piece as community is more fortified and unified when it comes together. And you can't have a community come together if you have hate. So how do you control the narrative? How do you control the masses in that way? And that's the depiction of it, right? That's what is creating that. And I think when we think about fear, it's not just hate. There's so much fear that is thrown out every single day. It's so intoxicating because it's fear this, fear that, fear narrative, fear this, fear that. And at the end of the day, at the bottom of fear, there is no such thing as fear. The bottom of fear is deep sadness, right? When we think about what fear truly is, it's the deep sadness of something actually coming into fruition that would deeply impact us. So when we understand that what is ours to hold and what isn't ours to hold, what is the internal locus of control that we have over our emotional regulation, over our emotional body, over our mind, over our spiritual, assets and just in who we are. And then we look at the external side of locus of control. We can't control the narrative that the news and the media portray. That's why I don't enmesh myself into social media. I have no social media, and that's intentional. When we think about all of these aspects, it's really important. What are we engaging our energy into? What are we engaging our time into? What are we nourishing our brain with, right? And what are we actually unnourishing our mind with? And it's really important to have that point of distinction and to be able to have that differentiation of what are we willing to nurture and nourish ourselves with. Do we want to feel heavy and bogged down and depressed and have high anxiety and have a lot of fear? Or do we want to have love, compassion, and empathy and grace and be in acceptance of all that is because we don't have control over anything outside of ourselves in reality?
Yeah, man, I love that word grace. I love that word grace. There's just such a lack of grace in our world right now. I mean, you talk about kindness and hope and blah 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 blah, but grace is it's kind of a different kind of word, right? It's like some religions pray and then they say grace. I mean, there's something about grace. I just love that word. Going back to, you know, a couple of different things you said there. I always
Mm.
when someone's not always, but when someone's mad at me, I like to do the old, if I try to give you a gift and and I don't take it, you
I
don't
like
take it,
ponies.
right? Who's holding the gift, right? It's like, and if I try to give you hate and you're not taking it, who's holding the hate, right? It's like you're drinking your own poison, trying to kill your enemy. It's just like such
Yeah.
madness. And that's what we're doing right now. Like you said, with social media and news and all this shit, it's like we're drinking the poison, hoping our enemies die and get hurt. It doesn't work that way. And the
And
lack
we
of nourishment and nurturing is so massive right now. It's crazy.
Yeah, and we think we're in the know, right, by tagging into social media. I had social media for a span of 3 years because I thought that was the thing to do to have a business structure. And I quickly realized it wasn't. Um, but there was this aspect that I would spend so much of my energy like posting content and trying to uplift and realizing how the algorithms are set is not for upliftment. It's not to make people feel better. It's to devalue one another. It's to put somebody down, make them feel less than, idolize somebody that doesn't even have half the things that they portray that they have, somebody to mutilate their face and mutilate their body to look like another. Like it's all about a system of devaluing one another. And I think that we have to be very cognizant of that and very aware of that. And when we're giving time and energy to things that devalue us, we're telling our soul that we are not valued. We are telling our soul that we are not worthy, that we are not deserving of happiness, of love, of fulfillment and peace, because we are doing the polarity of that. We're living in the duality of it.
Yeah. It's just like the news. I mean, you don't turn on the news and they go, "Hey, it's a great day. Everything's freaking awesome today. Weather's awesome, right? Everything's
Peace
great.
in the
Guys,
world.
tomorrow, right?" No, it's like 20 people died, house is on fire. It's like same thing with social media. It's like let's get you antagonized. Let's put all the ants in a jar and shake the jar and watch all the ants fight, right? It's just like freaking madness. Um, you talk a lot about, well, in your work, you do such amazing work, and I was going down the rabbit hole of you and all the stuff that you do, and I found the intergenerational stuff interesting because, hurt people tend to hurt people, right? And at some point, a generational hurt or generate at some point you have to break the trend, right?
Yeah.
And so, I mean, is that some of the work that you do trying to help people break that generational path?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the key thing is when we're speaking to generational and intergenerational and all these aspects of our ancestors and our descendants, it's really important to understand that yes, we do naturally bring forth a lot of the experiences and a lot of the wounding that happens within our root. So, within our body, we have a chakra system, and within our root system, that is where our lineage typically lies within all of the experiences that have happened throughout the lineage. And we don't not fully understand that because that's actually part of our triple helix, but part of our soul memory actually retains information that has happened 4, 5, 600, 700 years ago and beyond. So when we understand that it doesn't just have to do with what we visually have been cognizant of or what we visually experience or what we maybe physically experience or emotionally experience, it's important to understand that we are also DNA structures, right? And we have epigenetics, and those epigenetics are things that are really rooted within us as part of our DNA, part of our molecular cellular component. And what we can understand from the epigenetics is that we carry things from our ancestors in the way that we think about money, in the way that we think about family, the way that we think about relationship dynamics, the way that we think about love, the way that we think about ourselves, and how we feel about all of these elements as well. So it's really important to understand that when we are doing intergenerational like healing, a lot of the things that come to the surface haven't even been witnessed in this lifetime. And a lot of things have, depending on how much, somebody has experienced throughout their life, right? So when we are looking at cycles, let's take an unhealthy relationship as an example of that. If we've had 7 generations of very unhealthy marriages where, let's say, they were abusive marriages, and we tend to go into that same relationship dynamic because epigenetically and from witnessing and observing and from being through the experience, we then try to mirror and mimic that because that is a place of comfortability and a place of knowingness. The importance of when we are doing genetic and intergenerational and all of these things in terms of healing, it's important to understand the root of everything. And a lot of the times when we break a cycle, in order to break a cycle, in order to break a pattern, we need to understand the root of the pattern on why it was created. So if we ever look at family constellations, if we ever look at ancestral healing on how one ancestor will speak through another, it's really important to understand that the way that we carry ourselves at every given moment and every life cycle that is born in generation, we have a choice to break a pattern. We have a choice to break a cycle or behavior. And it's important that as we do that, and as if we choose to step into that, that we understand that that heals generations ahead of us, rightfully so, but it also heals the generations that have been before us. And that's the importance of generational and intergenerational healing. So what you have experienced in your childhood, a lot of the times, like say if you've had a poor childhood experience, you're like, I'm never going to do that as a parent. Like, I'm going to do the polar opposite. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that. And then all of a sudden, oh my goodness, like that's exactly what my dad did, or that's exactly what my mom did, right? Because we're reliving that pattern of behavior through epigenetics. So when we understand that and we catch ourselves in that awareness of that, is how can I choose something different? How can I choose a different pathway? How can I choose to break that cycle? How can I choose to show my children something different and create a new epigenetics? Because that is the only DNA molecule that is malleable, that we can actually change within us.
All right, doc. So how do we do it? How do we? I mean, like you said, I mean, the soul memory is just so strong. I mean, everyone listening will know that feeling of, ah, shit, that's what my dad said, or that's what my mom said. I can't believe
Or
I
my
just said
grandma, or
that,
my
right?
grandpa.
Right? It just came flying out of my pie hole. I can't
Yeah.
even believe it. And then on the other side, it's like my brother and I, right? He's a half brother. We share the same mom. We had different dads, but our growing up, our childhoods were such crash and burn missions. We both, like you said, it was like we are not going to do this. All right, we
Yeah.
are not going to do it. But that's an up here thing. I think you're talking more of a way down here thing. So it's easy to say I'm going to parent differently, but it's a whole other thing to say I'm going to work on my soul memory and cure that. So where does that work come in? Where do we go deeper
A
than
lot of the times, yeah, a lot of the times when we do intergenerational or generational healing, a lot of times it's through trance state, right? So trance state's bringing the soul body right to the front and having that dialogue, which is fully recorded. So when you look at back at it, you're like, oh my gosh, yeah, my grandmother did say that. She did me that. I remember my mom telling me that story, right? So a lot of times it
that?
happens in trance state where we go into like a transient state just so that we can bring the soul aspect back. But it's also important to understand that there's also always steps before that. So everything that I do in mentorship is always customized to each person that steps into the embodiment of my leadership, because every single individual is uniquely designed and has their own soul imprintation and their own, pathways and design patterns. So when you understand that, it's really important to, a lot of times, even in the physical body, we store a lot of information in our physical body, even, generational. That's why a lot of people have like hip dysplasia, or they have a lot of hip pain or lower back pain, because it's actually being held in the root, and it has nothing to do, yeah, labor throughout your work, your work span throughout your career. Yes, it can intensify that. But a lot of times, like, I don't know what I did. I don't know how that's sore. A lot of times that's where it will store because it's sitting in the root. A lot of times what we'll do is if we go through trance state, or we'll do family constellations. So it's when you go into a little bit more of a transient state, but it's you have other people acting as conduits to other people in your family, and they actually deliver information as you go through so that you could understand where that was rooted from. Where was that pattern? Where was that cycle? Where was it established? So that you can dismantle it and choose something different. So when we are going through that healing cycle and we're going through that healing process, it's important to have that accountability and that awareness that maybe it's not yours to fully hold and take ownership of, But now that you're privy to it and now that you have the awareness of it, you have the choice to do something different with it. And that's the power of that healing.
You know, my mom, crazy. Now that my son has a son, so now there's four generations. So when we get together and I say, all right, well, there's great grandma, there's grandma, then there's my mom, whatever, however that chain goes. And I always just say, I'm hoping that the crazy decreases as we go on. So Jet, my grandson Jet will be less crazy by a degree than my mom, right? Because it's got to stop somewhere. My mom has always had stomach issues, right? She's gone to every doctor. She's gone to this. She's gone to that. My dad died 30 years ago. She's never even had another date. And this, I go, Mom, you're looking in the wrong place to heal your stomach problems. They're
Yeah.
in your freaking head. All right. Your mind is so screwed up that it's creating all this pain in your gut, right? You have to heal the pain from somewhere.
A lot
And
of
then your
times,
pain in
yeah,
your gut will go, right?
a lot of times when we go through grief, grief is such a sneaky guy because grief is really the other demonstration of how deeply we love somebody, right? When we grieve and how deeply we grieve and the emotional expressions that come with grief, it's really another expression of how deeply we love somebody. And it's just the way that we demonstrate it is completely different, right? We go through an entire process. Grief is an entire process. What I've seen in grief and what I've witnessed and what I've seen, in my own consultations and throughout my own spectrum of grief is grief. A lot of times it sits in the heart field and is never actually digested through the body. And that's what creates a lot of digestive issues. So when people have massive digestive issues, there's a lot of wounding that is sitting between the heart and the chest wall and the esophagus that is actually going into the digestive system, which is causing a lot of disruption and disease and discomfort. So when we're not digesting information, we're not digesting an experience, we're not digesting, a conversation, a lot of times it will create indigestion because we're not digesting, we're not allowing it to integrate so that it can release itself fully, right? Because it's a mechanism. It goes from one comes from the top, goes through, and then you want to release it, right? So when we release out the memory, we release out the experience. It doesn't mean it's going to happen in 5 seconds. It takes time to go through grief and move through grief, but it sits, right? Grief sits. It doesn't leave until it's actually dealt with. And when we hold on to grief and when we hold on to the fear of grief or fear of losing somebody else, that quenches our gut and that makes our whole digestive tract not easeful, right? And makes it a lot of combativeness, a lot of bacteria starts growing in there. Nothing is digestible. We can't digest our food properly. We can't have proper bowel movements. We can't have all these things start taking place because we're actually allowing the grief, which a grief is one of the most powerful things that we can go through because it's a trajectory of emotions, right? We have anger, we have frustration, we're trying to, you know, bargained for that person to come back or why them or why me and all these things that end up happening within the grieving process, that it's important that we're acknowledging, we're accepting, and we're releasing, and we're allowing that emotional release to take place and not holding it as a place of contempt and holding it as a place of discomfort.
Yeah. I lost my wife 10 years ago to cancer and the grief just doesn't go away. So I got deep into a grief recovery program and now I'm working to become a grief counselor using that program. And the interesting thing is where the grief sometimes is. Like you talk about intergenerational stuff. Like a lot of people say my mom's psycho crazy because of my dad dying and she's never remarried anything. Where it comes from with my mom, and it might be even earlier, but my mom's mom died when my mom was like 4 months old.
Wow.
My mom's mom went out, they live in New York City, snowstorm, went to go get a coat for my mom because she thought she was going to be cold going out. My grandmother got pneumonia and died in the hospital. Now, I know that my mom's been carrying that guilt that she's responsible for her mom's death for her 90 years, right?
Yeah.
It's not my dad's passing. It's her mom's. It's the guilt of that,
It's a
right? And so,
compact, right? It's a compact, right? It's
exactly.
compacting.
And so to get there, to get people there, to go look at, You might be holding on from something from your great grandfather, you know, to get people there. How do you get them to open up to that point to start saying, you know what, maybe that is right. Maybe that's true. Because a lot of people fight you on it.
A lot of times when people come into stewardship or into healing with me, they're ready to let go. It's so painful that they can't live in that pain body anymore, in that sufferance anymore. They're ready. They're willing to go to the moon and back to be able to release it because they've been in deep states of suffering for quite some time. And when we realize that we don't need to suffer and that our loved ones would never want us to suffer, guilt is a very tricky thing when somebody passes because we have guilt, survivor guilt, and then we also have guilt and we also have anger that they've left without us, right? There's this whole compacting thing or what if or what I could have did this or could have did that. It's a part of that bargaining. And when we think about what happens when people come into, leadership or into mentorship, it's important to understand that this is a very safe space, right? I've been through where you've been through. I've lost a child. I've been through grief and I've been through things ending that I really didn't want to end. Grief is unique to every single person, and the way that they feel and the way that they process it is so wildly different. One person can have grief within a 6 month span of time and be released from that grief. Some people can carry grief for 10, 15, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60 years, right? So when we understand the measure of grief and how we hold grief, it's really important to understand that the person that has left or whatever the experience was that has left would not want us to be in a state of sufferance, would not want us to be in a place where we're living in a state of paranoia or living in a state of fear that somebody else close to us, will pass, or that we can never love again, or that we can never love somebody to the depth that we've loved them. Nobody would ever want that for someone that they truly love, or nobody would ever want somebody to be in a state of sufferance like that. No one. So when we think about the reality of it, and then we think about what's happening in the mental and the emotional and the spiritual and the energetic body, it's important to understand, what am I holding on to that I don't need to be holding on to anymore? What do I need to express? What do I need to cry about? What do I need to be angry about? What do I need to be frustrated about? What do I need to release? What is the emotion that is coming to the surface that is asking me to express it? And that's the importance of grief, is allowing us to express that emotional response.
So how do you get people to express it? I mean, how do you get them to trust? I mean, how do they, they've got to trust you. They have to trust somebody. They have to trust a spirit. They have to trust a God. They have to trust something. Like in AA, you find your higher purpose in AA in order to give it up. So I can't do this alone. I've got to give it up to something else. I'm not strong enough to do it, and I think in grief there's a lot of that in there where you like you said, I mean, you could hold on to it forever. I have friends who've lost a son 30 years ago that just can't let it go. My mom thinks she killed her mom 90 years ago. I mean,
Yeah.
90 years is a long time to live, let alone a long time to hold on to that pain, right? So how do you build that trust with them? Or like they're in a space now that they can start working on it.
I think, just us in this conversation is a good demonstration of how we build trust and rapport with one another, right? How I show up into presence and how we show up to be non-judgmental, how we show up to be open to space and open for dialogue and having questions and not telling somebody how they should feel and how they should process and how they should think and how they should move through life. It's about listening and asking them to listen, and in reciprocation of asking and listening to themselves, not even listening to me. I'm just stewarding, I'm just guiding. Ask your soul this, ask your heart this. And the first thing that I usually do with any client that is going through massive amounts of grief is we go right into a heart and heart connection where they go into in deep meditative state, and I go right into the heart center and they start crying in that state because they have so much sitting on the heart. And once they release that initial cry, that initial expression, it's always tears, right? Grief at the end of the day is deep sadness. Fear at the end of the day is deep sadness. And when they have that emotional expression in front of you and with you, and they share that with you, it's such a beautiful thing to witness. And I always say that it's such a beautiful thing to witness because you're entrusting the process of you listening to yourself. And that brings me to tears, right? So I think when we're building trust is to also understand if someone's too much in the mental body, what mental body do we need to work on to gain that trust, to garner that trust, to garner that relationship and that rapport so that we can go into the emotional expression of the body, or we can do more heart coherence, soul coherence, and get into a little bit of the depth of what is sitting in the body. So it's really just dependent on somebody. If somebody has a lot of mental blockage and they have a lot of depression or a lot of high anxiety, a lot of times it's about coming into the mind and releasing the mind. What are the thoughts that are coming through the mind? What are the fears? What are all these things? What are the beliefs? How do those coincide with the truth? All of these elements start to come into place. They're like, whoa, that's not even true, right? Why am I feeling that way? Why am I thinking this way? Let's go deeper, right? Because they're asking themselves, I'm prompting them to ask themselves the questions because they already have the answers innately within them. And I just steward and guide on where I'm seeing from my perspective and what I'm witnessing without judgment, right? Without judgment. You can't be in a reciprocal relationship, dynamic, mentorship without trust. Or if you feel like you're being judged and you can't bring something forward, you know, in sight of maybe being judged or them thinking something of us because we're not at our best in this now moment.
Yeah, that's so powerful in the trust. I mean, even kind of going back to what we were talking about at the very beginning with kids, I mean, whether you're working with children who's lost a mom or dad, or a parent who's lost a child, or like when I lost my wife for 28 years, and you know, you don't want to burden people with stuff. You don't want to just vomit all over people. I'm a big crier. I cry at toilet paper commercials on TV. I mean, I'm a crier. It just comes out of me. I'm just a really emotional kind of person carried on my sleeve. But during the last 10 years of this grief, there's something about grief where it comes in waves. Like I'll be sitting there in my backyard working out and doing a set, and set between set and a song will come on, and wham, it'll just go and you just start weeping, and the grief comes in waves. If you can get them to slow down, if you can
Yeah.
get the
Can they
big,
not be tsunamis?
right, exactly, not be tsunamis, and get a little bit distance between the waves,
Yeah.
start getting them and it does happen. Like when the first grief sets in, when you finally wake up, yeah, they're a lot more calm in those waves, and then they do get a little bit distant. But trust is trust is an interesting thing because it encompasses so many of our emotions, like you said, the fear, the hate, the love. Trust, it's a tough one really to get people because no one trusts anybody anymore.
Well, and that's the aspect of that divisiveness and the segregation is to not trust one another, to not trust community. And that also is to say that not everybody is trustworthy. Not everybody lives to the expectations and the standards of what you hold in integrity and what you hold within how you show up in loyalty and trust and all of these things. So it's also really important to create like who are your favorite people, right? When you're meeting somebody, you intuitively, energetically already know if you like that person. You can read a room 200 feet away, know that you don't like somebody's energy field, that you're not going to get along with them or something isn't, there's an uncomfortability, something isn't, calculating properly, they don't have good intention or they don't have the right agenda. All of these things come into play because energetically your energy is already speaking to one another and it's already creating dialogue. So you already intuitively know, right? When you're building rapport with someone, if you can trust somebody, within the first 5 seconds if that's something that you can lean into, if you can lean into that aspect of trust, if you follow your knowingness. But if you're in the mind and you're creating all of these fear perceptions and all of these fear projections and these perceptions of what happened in previous experiences, well, now you're creating walls, right? You're creating walls to actually, dismantle for other people to dismantle just in order to be in connection with you. So there's a place of having boundaries and then there's a differentiation of having walls, right? So boundaries is I accept nothing less for my life. If someone is going to have a seat at the table, these are my boundaries to have a seat at the table. You come with respect, you come with integrity, you come with honesty, right? Those are your boundaries. But when you're like, no, everybody's like a liar, everybody's this, everybody's that. That's a wall, right? That's a constructed wall within the fear receptors within the reptilian brain. That's just you trying to protect yourself, but that's not you actually allowing anybody to truly see who you are.
And we're just really great at building walls, aren't we? I mean, even more now probably than ever in history. I mean, we are like the greatest wall builders ever. I mean, it's built in. I mean, think about when COVID started, right? It's like, God forbid you walked into a store without a mask. Holy shit. I mean, a moat went up, walls went up,
Kill it.
kill it, get it, right? It's like, oh, I mean, even your neighbors, it's like you go out to get your mail and you're kind of like, around like, dude, I'm just getting my mail. I'm cool, right? Like, we've become these amazing wall builders, and honestly, we don't even know why because we're so starving for connection. Our soul is so lonely. Our souls are just so starving for love and connection and affection and like you said, nourishing and being nurtured, and yet we push it all away, right?
We push it all away because we indicate that everything will create discomfort within us, right? Will create sadness, will create frustration, hurt, all of these things. The only reason we protect ourselves is because we think we're going to get hurt, just like an animal in the wild. They'll protect themselves if they think there's a danger for them getting hurt, right? That's their livelihood, that's their survivalhood. And that's the same thing with us, but what we are negating on is that we're allowing the reptilian brain to really kind of being the conductor of the body, and we're not actually making heart and soul choices. We're making very mental choices that have been inundated with misinformation, right? Misinformation. Like if we think about 30 years ago, did you hate your neighbors? You could like you'd have tailgate parties, you'd have big barbecues, everybody was welcome, you'd have this. Not everybody's social to that extreme, but you would have gatherings, people would come together. You didn't even know where your children were in the neighborhood, who cares who you take care of, right? There was this aspect of trust within the community because you knew everybody had each child's best interest at heart and had each other's best interest at heart. And people are still out there, and there are still really amazing people out there. I'm not going to say that people haven't changed because of all the experiences that has happened, but it's also really not theirs also to fully own either because a lot of it has just been fear injections.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, I mean, it just comes back to like we talked about earlier, is fear. I mean, we're just so fearful of every freaking thing. Like when you said that hate, basically is just the foundation from fear, right? I mean, people who are racist, they hate another culture because they're fearful of them. I mean, the whites didn't want to educate the blacks because they were fearful. The blacks just going to take over, right? They were stronger, were smarter, and we're just all like, no, keep them down, right? I mean, men were fearful of women. I mean, and it's so bizarre because early times women were just so
Powerful.
idolized. I mean, they were the witches, they were the doctors, they were the healers, they were the goddesses. And, you go back, it's like, well, what the hell happened? How did we lose this love of women? I mean, not me. They're goddesses to me, but what happened with chicks? Why did we throw women under the bridge?
And I think there's this whole aspect about women empowerment, but when somebody wants to be more powerful and not have women that are intuitive and instinctual, be in high powered positions back in those days, like we're starting to see an evolution in this last, 50 something years. But aside from that, like before, men didn't love that, right? Like men, there's a reason why it's curated, why men are like literally those that essentially run the world, the top 1% are majority men, right? So when we think about that narrative and we think about what it took to get to that narrative, I mean, I think it's pretty insightful. But when we think about the power of women, I think there is some dichotomy of knowledge here because when we think about women empowerment, it's not about women being empowered to be a sexual object to a man or to be something and to be everything. That is not the place of being an empowered woman. An empowered woman understands the role of the divine male coming into partnership and the divine female's role, or whatever that union is, and male, male, female, female, whatever that might be. In reality, you need both of those alchemies to come together if for to be a really successful relationship, it's not about one being better than the other. It's about us being equal. It's about us both being empowered and both being in the embodiment of our power. And that's the importance of that. It's not about a woman can do it all, so she should do it all, and then she burns herself out, and then she can't do this. Like, there's just so much asphyxiation and there's just so much misinformation that is, really, honestly, I feel like it's poisoning young women's minds. Like, they have to look a certain way, they have to be a certain way, they have to do this, they have to do everything, and they can never ask for help, they can never do this, they can never do that because that's not empowered. Like, it's at a place where it's disempowering them. It's disempowering them from their empowerment. It's disempowering them from their strength, from their intellect, from everything that they're capable of. We can't be powerful if we're bogged down and we're depleted, right? Like, so there's all these aspects that happen with women empowerment and men empowerment that it's important that both communities can come together. Again, no degree of separation, no degree of divisiveness, and bringing the embodiments together and saying we love one another, period, right? It's not about we love one another because this one can do this and this can do this. We both are limitless, right? I might choose to do something different. You might choose a different pathway. But when we come together in union or when we come together in connection, it's to understand each other's strengths and to understand where there's also opportunities for growth and that neither are perfect.
Yeah, there's a beautiful polarity between the masculine and the feminine, right? And it's like we carry each inside of us. We carry the masculine, we carry the feminine, but women historically carry a certain dynamic, and a male has carried a certain dynamic. You can label it whatever you want,
Yeah.
but it's that polarity between the two that
And
makes,
make them so perfect,
right?
cohesiveness and collaboration together, right? And it doesn't say that it has to be all those types of unions, but it's just to say, like, you need both parts. Yes, we're both divine, females and males within us and within our own constructs. That's part of our creative, that's part of our structure. But it's important that as a woman, we're allowed to step into our femininity, or as a man, you're allowed to step into your femininity of creation, of how you want to create your life and how you want to create all these aspects, or how we want to create life and create life. Like, all of these aspects come into place. And the reason why women have higher instinctual, you know, gifts is just because of the way that they had to keep their young safe, right? So at the end of the day, but the man has more strength, right? So that to be the protector, to be this, to be that. And those are key things. And I don't think those are key things that we need to lose. I think those are key things that we need to embody and that we need to embrace of one another. I can be in my male construct. I got to provide. I got to do this. I got to do that. I got to this. But then I also have to be my divine femme. And I also need to create. I need to release. I need to flow. I need to surrender. There's a mixture of both. And when we have the mixture of both and we're living in androgynous energy, we are now in creator creatrix consciousness. We are now in creator creatrix energy field. We're now be able to weave both of our energy fields within ourselves. And that is the highest point of creation that we can create for ourselves.
What a freaking awesome place to be, right? And why do we fight it? I mean, why do we fight it? Why do we, you know, you see whether it's gender issues, whether you see it's, toxic masculinity, you see where it's just like women empowerment, but really women empowerment just turned into making women try to be like men and take over men's roles and women's roles, while men just only kept the men's role. It's
Yeah.
like, well, dude, you can't do it all, like you said, right? There's a limit to what you can do. So why don't we each do just what we are? Why do we
And
need to try to fight this?
and even though we are limitless, we could do everything we want to do, right? At the end of the day, but at the end of the day, is that sustainable? Is that longevity? Is that long term? Is that something that is viable? No, it's not, right? And we're not meant to do it all. That's the point. When you're in partnership or you're in union or even in friendship, it's important to understand that everybody has a strength. And that again brings us back to community, right? Everybody comes together to do their part, to offer their strength. Think about a business structure. As a CEO, I'm the visionary, but then I have everybody that is with me that is also adding all their strengths to the business, that is fortifying the business, and that is making it something that I couldn't individually, on the time that we have on the earth, make possible in one day's time or have the strengths that they have. It's honoring that. It's appreciating that. It's being grateful for that. It's having that deep gratitude for that and that deep understanding for that. Yes, we could do it all, but at what cost? At what cost?
Yeah. And what cost to your soul? What cost to your being? It's interesting that you name a CEO, right? Like you see it's I don't know if it's common, but there's a lot of cases where the male CEO, who's always in power, always got to do this, ends up going to a dominatrix and wants to be mistreated, wants to be, right? It's like to give up the power because they're so freaking tired of
I
always
get
being
it.
in control and power, right? And on the women's side, a naturally submissive woman is a healthy thing. It's not a degrading thing. It's we have natural roles, right? But somehow they've just all gotten completely screwed up here.
And I think we have natural roles, and I think for every dynamic, it's different. Like someone's strengths, some men might be more in their femme, some women might be more in their masculine, but it works, right? It creates that harmonious sense that they are both equally contributing to the relationship dynamic and to the partnership and whatever that might be. And I think it looks different for everyone. And we're trying to put it in this cookie cutter and we're trying to make it something that it really isn't. That everybody's relationship dynamic is different. And we need to stop looking at society. We need to stop looking at culture to tell us how to be and how to show up for our relationship or to show up for our business or to show up for a partnership. All of those aspects, we have to stop allowing people to tell us how we should show up. We just have to show up in the natural ability of who we are. That is the key, right? That is the key, is to show up for who we are and how we are and not what everybody else dictates it should be. If you're not a man that likes to be in your masculine energy and we're telling you you have to be in your masculine energy, that is absolutely draining and it's not sustainable. And now you feel like you're not even within your own identity. And again, bringing it back to the soul's desires is to have identity.
It's finding that truth. It's finding that truth that you've buried for so long. It's like we all have roles that we think we need to play, or people we need to be, or this persona we need to put out. And yet that child or that soul or that inside of you, right? It's just always in there screaming away. And the more you push it down, the more you suffer. And the more you suffer, if you could just acknowledge it, make peace with it, love it, tell it how much you love it, how good it is, and that it's okay, right? Let it out and let it thrive, right? Because like you said, we can do anything. We're capable of everything, but not if we aren't true to who we are.
Absolutely. And when we think about suppression of who we are, right, when we think about that pressurization of who we are, at some point it will become a boiling point where it does create that disease, that progressive illness within the body because we are not staying true to the inner truth of who we are. And that's why we see a lot of disease that happens as well, right? Like disease happens from wounding, it happens from so many things because it's energetic, right? When we have something come into the energy field and it comes into the physicality, it creates something. If it can't be released from the cellular disposition, it can't be released from the tissue or the muscle. That's where we start seeing a lot of the diseases start to take place, or autoimmune diseases, or cancers, or mental health issues. It's important to understand that if we can't be in the fullest embodiment of expression of ourselves, there's a toll to that. There's a toll to that. The body always keeps score of absolutely everything that we navigate through. And at some point, it will be so unsustainable that a lot of times it will lead to something that is not favorable that could have been dealt within the truth of the knowingness within self. And that's the importance of understanding ourselves and being true to ourselves and being honest with ourselves is who are we? What is my identity? How do I want to show up for my life? How do I want to show up for others? How do I want to show up for community? Who do I want to be? Right? Who am I? And that is the biggest question is who am I? And what is my purpose? Those are the two biggest questions that I've ever seen throughout all of my leadership containers.
And you're able to take people back. I mean, that's what's so epic. It's just like, I don't think we just need to heal you, but we need to heal back. We need to go further back than where you are right here because healing where you are in the present is not going to get you where you need to go. we need to go way back because the shit that's bugging you
It's
goes
rooted.
way back, right? So when you're working with someone and you're taking them through the process, you're building the trust, you're getting them to open up, you're getting into that meditative state, you're getting them to kind of, I don't want to use the word break down emotionally, but that's just what comes to mind, but to break the barriers emotionally. As they start seeing it, I just got goosebumps thinking about it right now. I mean, as they start seeing it, it must be this amazing, just this relief in people to find it, that you're able to pull it out of them.
It's the remembrance. It's the remembrance and the realizations that are the most profound thing. It's the remembrance that they were even able to cry in that way. A lot of people haven't cried for many, 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 many years, right? A lot of times when we have deep grief or we have, frustration or resentment or anything of that nature or compacted wounding that happens through childhood, a lot of the times they've become so desensitized where they have not been able to feel their emotional body, the emotional expression. So when they're able to release, it's that remembrance of the emotional body. Oh, I can cry like that. So if I can cry like that, can I laugh like I used to laugh? Can I find joy like I used to find joy? Can I find curiosity? Can I find all of these elements that they used to feel when they were a child? And it's about that state of remembrance, right? It's bringing back that state of remembrance when they were sovereign, when they were innocent, that innocence, bringing back the innocence into context. Because a lot of times that's what they are when we have things especially happen in childhood, it removes a lot of our innocence very quickly, right? Because it's compacted. It's like it's too like you can't be yourself. Part of soul loss, soul essence is gone, right? So it's about bringing it back, feeling it in, and integrating it from there. And it's a huge process. Like to say like this happens in 1 week. Yes, the emotional body will release itself, but I don't have really any containers that don't like spaces that they come into mentorship that don't last 6 months to a year for intentional reasons because we want to see that transformation. We want to see that and when you know what you know from what you don't know, it's hard to unknow what you know, right? It's really challenging to just go back into a shell of like who you were or not be able to feel yourself or not to be able to speak your voice. A lot of times people can't speak their voice. They can't say how they feel. They can't say what they yearn for. They can't say what they want. They can't say what's hurting them. They can't say what's bothering them. They feel like they have no voice. Right. So when we give that voice and when we give that power, it's incredible. It's incredible to witness. And when we think about, life and we think about what happens in life, we have to be able to experience life. And life, I know a lot of times it can feel like life is happening to us, but it's always happening for us for our greatest evolutionary growth. And I say that, and I've lost a child, right? So that's not something that I just say lightly in the words that I say lightly, but I also come with it with the blessings and the learnings and the teachings that have come of that, of where I've grown as a human being, of where I've understood my strength, of where I've understood where I can show up better, where I can value life differently. There's so many things that come into context when we move through life, when we go through a journey in life. And it's about embracing that. It's about integrating that. It's about allowing that acceptance space.
Mhm. Nothing like having an amazing cry that just turns into a big old belly laugh. For
Yeah.
some reason, that's like a gift, right? From the gods, from spirits, whatever, right? You just weep your ass off, and the next thing you know, you're just laughing. It's just like blessing as you release. And but that thing about finding your voice, I mean, it's becoming, I don't know if the right word is becoming, but it seems like it's more and more challenging for people to find their voice and be willing to be who they are. These like right now there's a lot of transgenderism and I was born this and I'm going to be that, but I don't think that's what I mean. Yes, all right. If you think you were born a gal and you're a boy, whatever, and you want to go back, yes, express that, release that, live that, whatever. But I think it's so much deeper than that as far as people finding their true soul and their true path. And I think you saying with just finding your voice and letting that out is such a massive gift if you can get people there.
Yeah, and a lot of times when, you know, anger is released or just a frustration or even just a really deep emotion is released, when somebody screams to the top of, their lungs just to be able to get that initial release of like what they were holding, it depends on the person, right? Each person is different, but that first expression was like they almost like shocked themselves and surprised themselves at that, because they
Yeah.
haven't heard that scream maybe since they were like a little child, right? So it's just about coming back to that, right? It's not to say we're going to go screaming everywhere, but it means that it's something that needed to be expressed because that was a way of expression. That was a way of transmutation of that emotional, that emotional body, that it needed to be done in that way and be channeled out that way. And that's okay, right? That's okay to be able to release that. But when we feel like we're not allowed to do that, it's not okay to do that. It's not acceptable to do that. It's not acceptable to be in your voice. It's not acceptable to speak up for yourself. All of these things, there's so much that happens as a man. You're not allowed to talk about your emotional body, push it down, do this, do that, show up, be a man. Your voice gets simulated. Your voice becomes quieter and quieter and quieter, and you become this aspect of who you actually really aren't.
Yeah. Tell me about your retreats now. If I'm reading this correctly, we've got one of them is the Illumination retreat, and Soullular healing. I like the Soullular healing. What's the deal? Are these two separate retreats? What are the retreats that you have here?
Yeah, so I have 3 retreats. So we do the Illumination retreat. The Illumination retreat is really about bringing back the illuminescence of your soul, bringing back that to the forefront for deep transformation. The retreats are usually about 7 to 10 days long. Some are really magnificent. I always go where I'm being called to the land. The land helps me transmute a lot of elements. I always use the elementals, the wind, the fire, the water, the land, everything has its place and how it transmutes the energy when I do transmutation, when I do, extraction, or if I do soul retrieval or anything of that nature. So that's really key for me. So I always go where I'm being called by the land. So the retreat can be anywhere where my soul tells me that's where we're going. It's really profound. So it's all about bringing back mind and body connection, mind brain connection, doing deep somatic movement. I'm not talking about yoga. I'm talking about listening to the guidance of our voice as we find the soul and the luminescence of the soul, and we allow the soul to move the body, which is a really, really powerful thing. And we release a lot energetically through that. And then we have, excursions through sacred sites. We pretty much do everything: deep meditative states, deep breath work, all about bringing back the luminescence, deep transformation, deep releases, deep regenerativeness that happens at the retreat. And then the cellular healing is
Real
really,
quick, before you go to the
yeah,
next one though,
yeah,
because I looked at your website, all right?
yeah,
Now we've done some traveling. My wife and I are scuba divers, and we're always looking for.
yeah.
She's been to crazier places than me. She's been Cuba and Egypt and Maldives and Philippines and all that stuff. So yeah, so I'm looking at your thing going, I want to do this.
Yeah.
And so when you plan one of these things, where's the next one? Machu Picchu, or is
Uh,
it?
Peru. We're going to Peru in June, June 7th to the 14th. We're going to all the sacred sites. I was invited by the Incan queen and king from Peru to come and do stewardship on their land. So I'm coming to, yeah, I'm going to do stewardship on the land. So they'll be greeting me when I get there. And then we're going to be going to every sacred site that they have there. And I'll be doing deep activations and transformations at the sites.
Wow.
Yeah, that is
So,
more like a very
so, so,
soul
wait. So, first of all, Machu Picchu alone is like
trek.
a super, spiritual place. Um, and so you're going to take the people who are on this with you to these different locations, and do you do a different modality at each place, or do they all, and depending on what place calls what to you?
Wherever the soul guides me through that transmission is where I'll go in activation. So it's always different. It's never the same. Yeah.
God, that's awesome. That's awesome. And this is 7 days in Peru.
That one's a 7 day, yeah, retreat. Yes.
That's awesome. So, um, that's the illumination retreat. And then the other one is the soullular healing.
Yeah,
Tell us about that one.
yeah, the cellular healing is really more about this, like the journey to soul, the journey to self, and really in that state of remembrance and bringing back the remembrance of full embodied healing. So we go through multi-dimensional healing. So we start usually with the mind, because usually the mind has, the more blocks and barriers. But each session is geared to who the participants are. So I tap into all of them as I maneuver and as I steward and as I guide. And a lot of times it can be laying down deep sessions. We're going to sacred sites as well, doing activations and things of that nature, doing somatic movement again, coming back into that mind brain connection, doing ancestral healing, going family constellations, understanding the epigenetics of what's happening so that we can heal forward. A lot of releases happen there. I would say that's probably one of the more powerful retreats. The Illumination retreat and the Soullular healing are probably my two favorite, to be quite honest, where I see the most deep transformation. A lot of times when people come, they're like, oh, it's going to be like a week retreat and like, yay. And they're like, oh my God, I didn't know this was this month. This is amazing. So you come in one person and you literally leave, having all of these, answers for yourself and just being different, right? You're showing up different because you're also being more cognizant of what's happening in your multidimensional aspect of who you are. So we understand what's happening in your cellular field, your energetic field, your spiritual field. A lot of things happen there. Then we move into more of the physical body, what's being held in the physical body, and then the intellectual. And then we go through all the chakra systems, and then we do like a deep awakening.
Ah, that's freaking awesome. It's funny that just their family and friends think they're going to a Club Med, and they come back like glowing and spiritual and like just a completely changed person. You're like, dude, would you drop mushrooms? I mean, what happened to you?
I don't use any hallucinogenics as a shaman. That's just, I don't believe that you need to have spiritual connection to be able to connect with yourself and with your soul. But I would say, most people that come to the retreat don't have to go to another retreat afterwards. Like I've never heard, oh yeah, I'm going, unless they're like just going to like a spa or something of that nature. But a lot of the times, like what this is it's not something that you have to come back 5, 10 times to get a refill. This is fulfillment, this is inner peace, this is finding you, right? This is not about me, this is finding who you innately are, who you want to show up as, who you want to embody, how you want to heal through life, because everybody heals themselves, right? Our skin, our natural ability of our physical body, our cellular DNA structure, we know how to heal ourselves. Our body knows how to heal itself. So does the mind, right? The mind knows how to heal itself. So does the physiological part of who we are. So does the emotional body. So does the spiritual. So it's about connecting into the pineal gland, understanding how that's activated and understanding how we can actually embody healing within ourselves.
I love it. Wow. Goosebumps again. So I get the soul bumps just talking about that stuff. Well, Roxanne, you've been amazing. You've been so gracious with your time. I know you've got a lot going on. There's just one last question I have, and I
Mhm.
lied earlier. I've got a confession.
Two questions. Uh
I have two questions. I'm sorry. Um, I always ask the "What if you could" question because that's who we are, the "What if you could" podcast. Um, but I always end my podcast by asking people one last question. And that is, if you wanted to leave us with something that was important to Roxanne, a saying, a thought, just something that, really was in your soul that you'd like to leave us with, what would that one thought be?
I would say that the power is within you, and to believe in yourself and to believe in all of your limitlessness of who you are as a beautiful being and how you steward and how you foster all the relationships and partnerships and community dynamics around you. You are the key, and it takes one person to affect change. And it's a trickle effect, right? It's a trickle effect. We give and we share and we love on one another and we show grace and we show compassion. It only takes one person to demonstrate that, in one place of you being in your own inner peace and your own emotional regulation, which exudes out and allows other people to understand that there's a different reality of how they can live life.
Knock that out of the park. Well done, my dear. That was beautiful. That was beautiful. And so much here. Just so much goodness, so much yumminess here. It really was terrific. I'm really grateful, Roxanne, for your time. So, how does everybody reach Roxanne? How do we get some of this goodness? Where do we go to find you and book all your stuff?
Really. So as I alluded to before, I don't have any social medias intentionally. They can find me on the illuminationretreat.com.
That's it, folks. That's all you get. Sorry. But that's all you need. All right. That's all I'm saying. Roxanne Chaput, you have been amazing. I'm just so gracious for your time. So grateful for all that you're doing for us as humans. And there's so much more to you, so much depth there. You could just feel it. And I think these retreats would be and will be life altering. You've already, experienced it over and over and over with people. So just keep doing what you're doing and giving what you're giving. It's you're a true gift, and I'm super grateful that you sat in with us today.
Thank you, Gary. I truly appreciate you as well. And thank you for everything that you do.
Cool biz. All right, guys. Thank you. That was the last episode of What If You Could. Tune in next time. But in the meantime, I'm going on a retreat with my friend Roxanne. I'll see you guys later. Thanks again for joining us on another episode of What If You Could podcast. Please subscribe, like, share, and give us any feedback. We'd love to hear it. And remember, if you can dream it, you can do it. See you next time.